Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. US envoy Tom Barrack says Israel must comply with the ceasefire as Lebanon launches a plan to disarm Hezbollah and revive its economy. Meanwhile, Trump hosts Zelensky and European leaders at the White House with tough talks over Ukraine, NATO and Crimea. Plus, Hamas accepts a new truce and hostage deal as hundreds of thousands protest across Israel, demanding action. The US is urging Israel to step up and honor its ceasefire commitments with Lebanon. Envoy Tom Barrack says it's now Israel's turn to pull back its remaining forces as Beirut kicks off a plan to disarm Hezbollah. Lebanon's cabinet has already backed a US proposal setting a timetable for disarmament. And Barrack says the next step has to be Israel's compliance. He says Washington expects progress from all sides in the coming weeks. I'm now joined by former Lebanese Prime Minister Fouad Siniora. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time this evening. Hezbollah's Secretary General has vowed to fight efforts to disarm the group. Can the US and Lebanese governments convince them to do so?
Well, first of all, good evening to you and to whoever is watching. It's very correct what Mr. Barrack has said today, that the Lebanese government has made a historic announcement and decision, and it is ready to comply with this announcement. And it is time for Israel now to take the necessary measures in order to stop the aggression against Lebanon on the one hand and to really withdraw. And there are definitely a number of other requirements. But this is the thing, because effectively Lebanon practically now is more or less like between the rock and the hard place. The rock, I mean, by that is the Israeli aggression, and on the other hand, the position that's being taken by Iran and by Hezbollah is that they are really trying to insist, because they are still somehow in a state of denial and in a state of let's say, not realizing its state of arrogance, not realizing what really happened. So it's very important to help Lebanon in terms of a step that has to be made by Israel, and at the same time in making it really helpful to Lebanon, first of all in facilitating the process for the handing over of the weapons of Hezbollah to the Lebanese state, and at the same time in making it possible to really provide the necessary assistance to the Lebanese legitimate forces, I mean the the Lebanese army and the internal security forces, in order to take over the situation and to avoid any step that may be taken by Hezbollah in order to make it difficult for the process in the handing over of the weapons.
But
I believe that
Can I just ask you?
Yes,
so do you think that it is possible to disarm Hezbollah because they don't want to be disarmed and they're saying they're going to fight this? And could Hezbollah fighting this lead to social unrest, more social unrest in Lebanon?
Yes. Well, actually, this is the situation that has been taken by Hezbollah up till now. And his position was actually instigated by the trip that was made by Ali, the Iranian envoy, the latest trip, and this is the way they are behaving now. This is why I say that Lebanon has to be helped in order to avoid any misbehavior by Hezbollah that will be instigating some sort of a sedition or social disorder in Lebanon. Definitely, the position taken by the Lebanese government is against any action to be taken by Hezbollah to create a sedition or a disorder. But nevertheless, one has to really take every position in order to facilitate, to make it easier to Hezbollah to hand over. The decision to hand over is taken. The Lebanese government is committed and is firm in its position. What is required now is the what do you call it, the wisdom of the implementation, the phasing, the priorities, as well as the position that should be taken by Israel to facilitate the process, because we don't want to really make it more difficult and at the same time leading to disorder that is definitely very, very, very costly in every sense.
And,
nevertheless, the thing that should...
Can I just ask you, sorry to interrupt you, but another question I want to ask you is a lot of people in Lebanon point to Israel's actions in Syria, Gaza, and also in the West Bank, and they say Lebanon needs a strong resistance against Israel's aggression. What do you say to those people who say Lebanon actually needs Hezbollah because of Israel's aggression that they're seeing in the region?
Well, what they are saying is correct. What they are concluding is incorrect. That what Israel is doing in the West Bank and in Syria is definitely an aggression and it is not acceptable. What they are concluding is that they need the Hezbollah to protect Lebanon. Well, what I can say, what has been proven over the past months, that the arms in the hands of Hezbollah has proven to be a liability. It didn't really help them to protect Lebanon or to deter Israel. And at the same time, it didn't help them to protect themselves, you see. Israel, what is doing now is hunting them one by one. And they are unable to retaliate in this respect. And effectively, what has been going on, because they started with a certain assumption when they really pushed Lebanon into this war on the 8th of October 2023, and without realizing what are the consequences of such an action and what are the abilities, the military abilities of the Israeli army, which actually they have invested a lot in technology, in ability to infiltrate in the positions and the personnel of Hezbollah, and they managed to make this let's say, what I can say, overcoming the Hezbollah. So that's why I would say it is a liability. The weapons of Hezbollah now has proven to be a liability to Hezbollah and a liability to Lebanon. The thing that has to be really always said and to made clear to Hezbollah and to the let's say supporters of Hezbollah, that it is the only way for the Lebanese who were really obliged to leave their houses and their properties in the south and their villages in the south. It is not possible for them as long as the situation is not peaceful. To the contrary, as long as Israel as well is continuing its aggression. Besides that,
Fouad, I'm so sorry.
When they say
We are actually just out of time. Fouad Signora, thank you so much for joining us. Former Lebanese Prime Minister, it was brilliant to have you on and your thoughts. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, sir. Now, happening right now, a high-stakes meeting at the White House as Donald Trump welcomes European leaders and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. The talks follow Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. On the table are security guarantees for Kyiv, but also Trump saying Crimea stays with Russia and NATO membership is off the table. So lots to discuss right now. And for more on this, I'm joined by Vilgaldas Ushatkas, former Lithuanian diplomat who served as the EU's ambassador to Russia. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. So we're just currently getting some updates right now that are saying the European leaders have arrived at the White House. So it's all happening. How unprecedented is a meeting on this scale? And are European leaders there just really supporting Zelensky so there's no repeat of that showdown we saw in the Oval Office back in February?
Well, absolutely. It's a tipping point in European history and from our perspective, even in the world history, because the fate of of sovereign country, independent country, which was attacked unprovokedly by Russia 3 years ago through conventional means. And now, the deal is being made. We just saw last Friday Putin and Trump rolling out the sleeves and using the red carpet reception in Alaska to start that diplomatic process. So for Europeans, it's a few-fold feeling. First, for me, as the first European Union ambassador after 2009, when the Lisbon Treaty came into force, it's disappointing to see that the future of Europe is decided not in Europe, but at the White House in Washington, D.C. On the other hand, that demonstrates that reality, who is the boss of the Western world. So United States remains the major, and the key player. Certainly, of course, it's unprecedented in a way that you have half a dozen, not all Europeans, but half a dozen leaders, including heads of European Commission and NATO, are now at the White House in support of Zelensky. And last, I think what is most important is not so much that they're going to support morally, psychologically, and try to mitigate the repetition of the February meeting, of the clash between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. But I think from the President Trump's perspective, what matters, and for Zelensky too, what those half a dozen of European leaders are bringing to the table. What's going to be European contribution to the future implementation of the ceasefire or peace deal with Russia, and what kind of role Europe will play, because at this stage, with all due respect, Europe was kind of in a geopolitical irrelevance.
So it's really interesting because what you just said to me really stood out. What are Europeans going to bring to the table? Because obviously there's something we don't know, because following Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, we don't know what Russia offered the US. And now there's concerns that Donald Trump is going to give the Russian president everything he wants. So how important is today's White House meeting for the future of European security too? Because, it seems like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin set the precedent for how this war should end.
Well, it's of paramount importance for Europe and for the world, from my perspective. Again, because the war is taking place on the European continent, and Europeans at the end of the day will have to contribute to resolution of that. So what Europeans can do, and I think there is a greater realization, although belatedly, after almost a year when President Trump is in power, Europeans started to realize and understand that you have to talk to Donald Trump in the same language, the language of real estate dealer, a person, a businessman who likes to make a deal and who talks in language of contracts. and signing agreements. So Europeans have finally understood that in order to retain American presence in Europe, political, military, intelligence, and diplomatic, as we see, I mean, we'll have to pay. So that's why the last NATO summit has increased commitment of defense budget by member states to up to 5%. So that's the first one. Secondly, we'll have to pay for American support to Ukrainians, which have started literally about a month ago. And last but not least is going to be, I mean, about something which is still unclear, and I hope we will learn after today's meeting of leaders in the White House, what kind of security guarantees, robust, a kind of NATO security guarantees, Putin and Trump have discussed. And, we know on the one hand that the entire war launched by Russia have started very much because Putin did not want to see, and he wanted to refute American increased role in Ukraine, especially defense and intelligence-wise. So for me, it's hard to believe that Putin would acquiesce American security guarantees, which would equal to defense of territory and stationing of American troops on the ground. What he may acquiesce and accept is European security guarantees to Ukraine, which, from Putin's perspective, does not entail, does not present an immediate military danger, because none of Europeans have capacity to fight alone and to win over Russia. At this stage, we can do it only with American backup and with American leadership. So, but it is at the, in the final stage, it's clear that Europeans will have to contribute both financially, so that we retain American military dominance in terms of continuous military supplies for Ukrainians to fight potentially with Russians. And secondly, there is a requirement to have a deterrent force, something which would deter Russia from repetition of the military activities.
And sorry, can I just interrupt you there? Because actually, I did want to ask you about that at the moment, because President Zelensky is speaking ahead of this meeting with European leaders and Donald Trump. He said we should not expect Putin to drop his plans for further aggression. And we saw overnight that Russia launched attacks on Ukraine. They say at least 10 people were killed. So the big question is your experience with Russia. Do you think Russia has any interest at all in ending this war and coming to a peace?
Well, that's a good question. From my point of view, reading Vladimir Putin and knowing him personally, he retained that goal to control Ukraine. At the same time, Russia has also paid a big price. I mean, we don't know exactly, because it's not transparent and open society and the government, so we don't know how many hundreds of thousands Russians died and what's the state of economy. But clearly, they're going through the painful period when it comes to economic, financial, and human. So, the question is, that's the first one. The second, for Putin, what matters, his goal is not to reconcile with Zelensky. He wants to make a deal with Trump. He wants to make a deal with the United States of America, the superpower of the world, so as to ensure that there is a division of spheres of influence, because Putin thinks in those terms of spheres of influence, and that there is no presence of American troops on the ground which would endanger Russian security. So that's his ultimate goal, while at the same time, one should not be naive, as President Zelensky and many Europeans are not naive, that Putin will continue to try to destabilize Ukraine, and probably one day would wish to see his own man in Kiev.
And just a quick question before I let you go. You said you know President Putin personally. What kind of man is he, and what kind of negotiator is Vladimir Putin? Because we hear this all the time, that he's such a slick negotiator. He knows what he wants. He can convince people. Who's the man that you know? Well,
he's a hardworking and very committed and well-prepared leader. He goes, having examined not only the file, what's going on in the front lines, but he goes through the personal file of each of the participant of a negotiating team, because that's his profession from the past as KGB agent. And, he's very, very capable to manipulate and to deceive the partner, as we have seen in the past in his talks with European leaders like Merkel and Hollande during the first war, when I was working as EU ambassador and intimately following those events from 2013 to 2017.
Absolutely fascinating to speak to you and get your insights and analysis. Thank you so much for Galdas Ušackas for joining us this evening. Now, Friday's meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin drew plenty of attention, not just for what was said, but for what their body language actually revealed. For a closer look at what their gestures and movements really said, we turn to our body language expert, Mary Cervello. Mary, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if you heard my first guest there, but knew Vladimir Putin and just explained a little bit about who the man behind the Russian president is. But what did you make of Trump and Putin's body language revealed about who held the upper hand during that Friday meeting? What struck out to me was really how friendly it was. The red carpet was rolled out. There was a military fly past. I think the world couldn't really believe it.
It was quite a party, wasn't it, Leanne? It really was something. I mean, especially at the beginning. You have to look at the parts of this this gathering. In the open, no question about it, it looked like two old buddies getting together. How are you doing? A firm handshake on both sides, a few pats here and there. Very, very lively. Putin, the biggest contrast, though, if you think back to Helsinki, remember when they were going to get together, Putin and Trump, and try to patch things up between them, he was slouching. This time, he was all energetic. From the time that you see them on the red carpet there, and a nice brisk walk to the limo, both of them looked like all systems go. Very friendly, very positive. But things changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if we can pick up where things actually change, because I felt like when I was watching it, and I don't know if many viewers feel the same way, things seemed to change when they came out of the negotiations. The US side seemed to have a more sour look on their face compared to the Russian negotiators. And then obviously Vladimir Putin stood up first and gave the speech at the lectern, which many people thought was slightly strange. Is this where things started getting a little bit different between the two men?
Absolutely right, Leanne. So Trump immediately deferred to Putin. He was the host of the gathering, but obviously his body language said he wasn't thrilled with the way the talks had gone over the last 3 hours. He was what I would call subdued. Putin started talking, and for the first 4 minutes, quite a bit of time, he was talking about being neighbors and kind of everything, issues unrelated to Ukraine. And throughout that time, in fact, most of the time that Putin talked, Trump was just staring straight forward, just kind of like da-da, 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 no eye contact, not looking at him. The only times that Trump did actually kind of do what I call a trunk turn, where he went like this, kind of looked to the side, or when he would just glance over at Putin. Very few times it had to do with Putin saying something that was contrasting Trump's performance to Biden's performance, or flattering him in some way. But most of the time, Trump was subdued, low, relatively low energy throughout. And that continued when he took the mic.
And there's something happening today. I don't know if we can talk a little bit about this, but Trump has been furiously posting on his social media platform today, Truth Social, where he's claiming he settled 6 wars, saying, I know exactly what I'm doing. He's come out really defiant on social media ahead of these European talks and after the criticism he's received from the press following that Alaska summit. Tell us more about why he's doing this and what's behind his attitude towards social media and all the gesturing.
Trump is more than any other president I've seen, totally fixed and transparent about the way he reads his press, about the way what people are saying about him. And there's no question about it that he does not like the way he's been reviewed at that press conference with Putin. It's going to be interesting to see if and what changes around that, but he was not at all happy about it.
And just one quick final question. Will Zelensky, do you think, choose to wear a suit and tie for his meeting with President Trump and J.D. Vance today? Because we all remember in February that absolute showdown they had in the Oval Office about his choice of clothing, and the body language between all three of the men just seemed so uncomfortable at that time.
You're so right, Leanne. It will be interesting to see what Zelensky does. I think he is, I guess if I were to guess, I would think that he would stay the course. He is who he is. He's presented himself as somebody who is very much in touch with what's going on with his country and doesn't need to really dress up for the occasion. So that would be my guess.
And also, just with European leaders meeting Trump today, what body language cues should we watch for that might reveal the dynamics behind the scenes? Because as we were just talking there, you said Trump and Putin all happy on the red carpet. Then Trump sort of changed towards the end of that meeting.
Right. Well, it was after the two of them had spoken and they came out for the press conference that things changed. Clearly, it wasn't the outcome that Trump wanted. Again, I watch for eye contact. That's a big indicator to me. Trump was listening to Putin the whole time on the side of him, but only rarely would he take and turn. And then when Putin would flatter him, say, what he had done in terms of trade and so forth, Trump's fingers on the side of the podium, he drummed the side of the podium ever so slightly. But these were micro movements. Today, with the European leaders, just like anybody else, I would look at that body language, not just when they're talking, but when their colleagues or when Zelensky's talking. Look at when other people are talking. Sometimes they don't realize or that they're on the stage even when they're not speaking. And that's what you have to watch for.
Mary, thank you so much for your fascinating insights, and I hope you join us again. It's so interesting, and I always think flattery and eye contact get you everywhere. Mary, once again, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Leanne.
Pleasure. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Hundreds of Air Canada flights remain grounded after striking flight attendants refused to comply with a government-backed order to return to work. The strike began on Saturday morning after months of negotiations over pay. The Canadian flag carrier normally carries 130,000 people daily and planned to ramp up operations on Sunday evening until the union did push back. An Indian High Court order banning pigeon feeding in Mumbai has led to mixed reactions. Authorities imposed the ban to tackle health hazards linked to pigeon droppings, but the move has angered animal lovers and religious feeders. Earlier this month, hundreds of people clashed with police over the closure of a pigeon feeding spot in the Indian financial capital. And slang words like skippity and tradwife are among thousands of new words being added to the Cambridge Dictionary this year. Other words include workwife, delulu, and mouse jigger. There we are. Now, Hamas has reportedly accepted a new ceasefire proposal in Gaza, marking a potential pause in the 23-month-long conflict with Israel. Mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the US are expected to announce an agreement and set a date for renewed talks. The plan could include a 60-day truce and phased release of hostages, though Israel has not yet responded. The move comes amid mass protests in Israel demanding the release of hostages and growing international efforts to halt the fighting in Gaza. For more on this, I'm joined by Palestinian Legal Advisor Dr. Kassim. Sir, thank you so much for joining us this evening. A pleasure to have you on the show. So, Hamas has told mediators it approves the latest ceasefire proposal. How much pressure is the group under to accept the conditions as Israel prepares for a full-scale invasion of the Gaza Strip?
I think both parties are likely to be under pressure for two reasons. The Hamas, I think, under pressure because the situation, the people of Gaza are in dire need for food and medication. And I think the demonstrations that went into many cities in Israel do put lots of pressure on the government of Israel to most likely to force it to accept the new proposal. And I hope both parties will come to an agreement maybe tonight or tomorrow morning to reach an amicable settlement or a midway settlement so that the people of Gaza will not suffer any further disease and death.
And reports are suggesting a temporary committee would manage Gaza after the war ended, with full authority resting with the Palestinian government. Now, this is really interesting because what legal hurdles are in place to set up a new functioning government in Gaza, because it hasn't had one for such a long time, and within Palestine as a whole?
I am not optimistic if the Palestinian Authority is going to take over the situation in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority is infested with so many problems, including corruption and no advisors that guide its work. Basically, the PA is a subordinate to the military government of Israel. And therefore, I don't think it will have any credibility with the people of Gaza. I think the best solution is to think of an administration. We don't need another governor like the situation in Iraq, for example, when Bremer was appointed. We need people, indigenous people from Gaza. They know exactly the people, their needs, their inroads, and they are more capable to manage the situation. And those people can be picked up with agreement of the municipality mayors in Gaza, dignitaries in Gaza, and I think this is maybe the best solution. But I don't think the PA would be able to fly any government in Gaza.
And that's really interesting because I have interviewed people and ministers from the PA on the show who say that they have a framework that's ready to go as long as Hamas ceases fire, they are able to come into power and have some control within the region. So that would be their argument to what you've just said. But also, I just want to ask you, Israel's Prime Minister, you touched on this earlier for me, has criticized those large protests in Israel against his handling of the Gaza war. How damaging is this for Benjamin Netanyahu? Because we know his coalition government is also on thin ice.
This demonstration that took place yesterday, I think this is a turning point in the political scene in Israel. The reason I'm saying this is that in the beginning, the families of the people, of the hostages or the POWs in the hands of Hamas used to demonstrate for the release of the hostages. The demonstration yesterday has additional item, which is very important to note, which is to stop the war. I think this is an addition that is very crucial in yesterday's demonstration. The people now, and the demonstration people gave an estimate of about 1 million Israelis were demonstrating in various cities. They are calling to stop the war, not only to release the hostages, but to stop the war. And this is a new serious development, and maybe it should register in Netanyahu's mind.
It's absolutely fascinating to speak to you. Thank you so much, Dr. Anis Kassim, Palestinian Legal Advisor. It's been fascinating to have your thoughts on the show. I appreciate your time. Now, India is bracing for the impact of new U.S. tariffs set to take effect next week. President Donald Trump has doubled duties on imports of Russian oil to 50%, a move that could hit Indian businesses hard. The U.S. is one of India's biggest markets, with exports topping $85 billion last year. Now, workers fear job losses, while some economists urge closer ties with other BRICS nations. Yenna Lee has the story.
Footwear crafted by hand for customers that could soon walk away. Leather manufacturers in India's northern Agra are bracing for a hike in tariffs on Indian imports to the US.
US clients like our shoes, but if the tariffs increase, our products will become more expensive for them. It will be difficult for us to sell to the US market.
Levies of 25% came into force earlier this month, but next week that number is set to increase to 50%. That's among the highest Trump tariffs to date. India is the second largest producer of footwear in the world, second only to China, and the industry employs more than 4 million people. Businesses that were viable fear their profit margins will disappear overnight, with lasting consequences for workers.
When tariffs are high, both finished products and raw materials become more costly. Businesses will flee the extra cost and move out of the country. We'll lose our jobs.
After 5 rounds of trade talks, the two sides couldn't agree on opening up India's farm and dairy sectors. Washington also demanded that India stop buying sanctioned Russian oil, and the US president said that the tariffs were in retaliation for those purchases. Protesters in India have called for US products to be boycotted in response, and the Indian government called the duties unjustified and unreasonable.
So you can't do business with a country where, an individual, the entire policies depend on the whims and fancies of one individual.
A last-minute step-down is unlikely, as media reports that US officials will no longer be traveling to India for trade talks next week. Yenna Lee, Al Arabiya, English.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Australian airline Qantas has been fined $59 million for illegally firing over 1,800 ground workers in 2020. A court issued the record fine after Qantas laid off its employees during the COVID-19 pandemic. The carrier says it will pay the penalty fine, which has been welcomed by Australia's Transport Workers Union. And the Swiss watchmaker Swatch has apologized over an advert which showed a model pulling the corner of his eyes. The slant eyes image, historically used to mock Asians, has caused uproar in China. Swatch has now removed that material. A reminder of our top stories. US envoy Tom Barrack says Israel must comply with the ceasefire as Lebanon launches a plan to disarm Hezbollah and revive its economy. Meanwhile, Trump hosts Zelensky and European leaders at the White House with tough talks over Ukraine, NATO and Crimea. Plus, Hamas accepts a new truce and hostage deal as hundreds of thousands protest across Israel, demanding action. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.